I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities, and we do this a number of different ways. This show is one of them. We also have a Facebook group of like-minded people committed to spiritual growth and transformation, and we would love to have you join us at liveauthentically.today/FB. I also have my debut book out. It is Soaring in the Universe, called SOAR, SOAR, and it's a spiritual experiential journey through a transformative event in my life and shows how I partnered with the universe to create my new reality. So next time you're on Amazon, go ahead and check that out. So we have a great show planned for you today. I have with me Andrew Wallas. Hey, Andrew.
Hi, Pamela.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's a great, great pleasure.
Yeah, I'm super excited about our conversation today.
Me too. Me too.
Andrew is a pioneer in business culture and spiritual transformation, and he's going to tell us all about his alternative strategies for life and work today. So can't wait to hear about all of that and all the amazing work you do in the world. But first, the way we start the show off every time is by asking my guests the same question, and that question is, how do you live authentically every day?
Well, the most truthful answer to that question is I don't. And for me, what I've found over many years is the way to be more authentic is to bring awareness to any area where I'm inauthentic or any area where I'm not being authentic. And that's the greatest area of growth for me is to have enough humility and enough awareness to spot where I'm out of authenticity with myself.
I love that. So tell me a little bit more about that. What does that look like? What is the thought process like?
So I think human beings, without having any particular judgment about it, I think we have the capacity for tremendous self-delusion. And that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but we just have that ability. And, I remember actually 25 years ago, living authentically was the most important thing for me. So I woke every morning with an intention and a prayer to live authentically that day. And what happens when I did that is I would exclude a lot of experiences that supported the idea of being authentic. And much later on from that, I tried to be more and more honest with myself about my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. And so for me, the greatest tool in living authentically is self-honesty, is really having the courage to be more honest with myself every day. And let me put that in context. So, life is made up of polarities. So we have a polarity between beauty and ugliness, or success and failure, or good and bad, or right and wrong. And so it goes on. And the thing about that is that beauty has no meaning without ugliness. You cannot have one without the other. So the only way that beauty or success or kindness gets its meaning is through ugliness and failure and meanness. And what we learn very early on in families or in schools or in our religious tradition is an emphasis to be good, an emphasis to be positive, an emphasis to be one end of that polarity. And in order to do that, we have to deny the other polarity. Mm-hmm. And so for me, self-honesty and authenticity comes with a deep recognition that I am beautiful and ugly, that I'm kind and I'm mean, and not be frightened of the shadow, not be frightened of the other end of the polarity. And when I begin to accept and acknowledge both ends of the polarity, then I can be more authentic in the middle ground. So that for me is a huge differentiator in terms of authenticity.
Yeah, I love that. And that contrast is so beautiful. That's essential. That's an essential part of this spiritual transformation, because without the contrast, we wouldn't enjoy and appreciate, like you said, all of the positive things, all of the things we're conditioned to seek after, and just kind of as we're conditioned also to kind of stuff away all the negative stuff. So we really do have to welcome that contrast, but then really tap in and tune into how we're feeling. I realized on my journey, that was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
Really tap into, how do I feel? And I start off my coaching sessions a lot like that. How are you feeling? And a lot of people are kind of taken aback. Sometimes it's a little jarring because they're like, I'm not used to being asked that. And I don't really know how I'm feeling. And I think that's such a big piece of the journey, just tapping into how do you feel? Because I believe that authenticity always feels good. That might be uncomfortable at times as we're working through some things, but we're naturally drawn. Our natural state is authenticity. Our natural state is joy. That's where our souls really want to be. It's just that through this earthly journey, we have different challenges and obstacles to navigate, which again gives us the contrast to launch those desires about what we really do want to be part of our life. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how tuning into how you're feeling in the moment has been a piece of your journey.
Well, I completely agree with you, Pamela, because, in my 20s, as a white male, I had no idea what I felt, most of the time. And I remember when I first went into therapy and I was asked, what do you feel? I had no idea. And other people could tell that I was angry, but I had no idea I was angry. If I felt anger, I had a tendency to sulk or a tendency to withdraw, a tendency to close down. And even, joyful feelings like love or opening my heart was very, very difficult for me in my 20s and 30s. And so I think it's a great entry point. It's a great question. How do I feel? And sometimes I need a little bit of coaching around that. Sometimes I need someone to guide me a little bit to say, what am I feeling now? It's a tricky feeling that I've buried because it's uncomfortable or because there's something getting in the way of it. And very often for me, I've spent many decades exploring my feelings. I often find a good entry point is the body. For me, feelings are kind of more located in the stomach, in the belly. And I often now I ask myself what's happening in my body. I put my hand on my stomach or on a part of my body that's tense and ask what's going on there. And often surprising things come up because if there's a discomfort in the body or something happening in the body, by definition, it's kind of unconscious. It's something that I've taken out of consciousness. And as you say, once the feeling is there, the great thing about a feeling is it cannot be right or wrong. If I say I feel sad and someone says to me, no, I say, well, that's how I feel. That's my authentic truth in that moment. And so feelings are very reliable, but they're also transient. They're also, my feelings are not reality. And if just as you were saying, if I authentically connect with that feeling, then it passes through very much more easily than if I deny it or try to push it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would be one of the first steps that you would coach people or you would recommend? Let's say they want to embark on their own spiritual journey. What's one of the first things that they can do to start to heighten their awareness, see the world through different lenses, etc.?
So the very first step, and in one sense, the last step, is self-honesty. It is to begin to, first of all, create an intention to be more honest with myself. And secondly, to allow other people to coach me, to feed back to where I might be out of self-honesty. So, for example, I might be pretending to be very kind to someone, but I might have a lot of other unresolved feelings. Now the only way through that is to be more authentic with the fact I feel angry, I feel resentful, and then underneath that, I feel hurt. And to get down to the hurt and to be honest about that means I can release that, and then there's a more authentic level of kindness, or there's a more authentic way of being. So it's really helping each other to be more self-honest. And one of the great, it's almost like a feedback loop for me, is the voice. the voice gives away a huge amount of information. So I work, like I'm sure you do, I work on the telephone quite a lot without a visual. And I actually like that because it's amazing how much information you can gather from the little intonations in the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell when someone, even if you're watching television or something, someone's voice just goes a little bit, and you know that there's something there that would be beneficial to explore.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because that is such a big piece of this. We have inputs from in many different forms, right? The words
Yeah.
that people use, the voice, the body language. And so I'm curious, how do you incorporate your intuition into, reading a situation or reading into the authenticity of a message that's being delivered to you?
So, as we know, Pamela, we live in a culture, particularly the business culture, that is very mind dominated.
Yeah.
And not only is it very mind dominated, but it's very left brain dominated. And as I'm sure as most of your listeners know, the left brain is very rational, it's very logical, it's very analytical, and it's very, very linear. So a lot of our thinking is very linear. We start here, there's a middle, there's an end. And intuition is something that is really concerned with the right brain. The right brain is more spiral, it's not linear, it's more magical, it's more about intuition, and also it's more about instinct. So for me, it's been a very long journey because, again, I grew up in a particular culture, and as a boy and as a man, I was taught to be very rational, and I was taught to be very logical. I have deliberately and purposefully practiced intuition over 2 or 3 decades. And for me, intuition starts with listening. It's really about listening to what's happening within me very attentively. So even now, I would say, or especially now, 2 or 3 times a week, I have a little intuition or a little instinct about something, and I overrule it. And sometimes 2 or 3 hours later, or 2 days later, I think, oh my, that's what it was trying to tell me. It's always reliable. But a lot of the time now, I don't override it. So I have an intuition about something. So the first thing is listening. The second thing is to trust it, to really learn to trust it. And that takes time. So I trust it now. If I get an intuition about anything, and particularly in a business document or in other areas of my life, if I'm reading a document or I'm looking at a spreadsheet full of numbers, I always ask intuitively to go to a particular place. And so I've developed a trust in my intuition, which is significantly more than it used to be, and it's still got a long way to go. So I would say I live my life based on intuition and instinct pretty much every day. And I practice listening to and trusting. And it's very difficult to describe intuition because sometimes we call it a small, still voice inside. And it is like that, and yet it's not a voice. I get little inner nudges, little inner reminders, and it's like a clear voice, but it's not a voice. So I don't know how else we describe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just that feeling. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I operate much the same way. I rely
Yeah.
on intuition heavily. And I do that because I have some very solid core beliefs that serve me. I
Yeah.
believe that the best is yet to come. I believe that life is always rigged in my favor. I believe that regardless of the outcome, I will be okay either way. So that allows me to really lean into my intuition and trust it and know that I don't have to have it all figured out. If I'm feeling the pull to do something or not do something, even though I don't have the next steps figured out, I have such a solid core belief system that I know I can trust my intuition. I know I'm going to be fine no matter what happens. And actually, then I can look at the future with a sense of wonderment and curiosity and anticipation, excited anticipation about what's to come, because I've now allowed the universe to start to work its magic. So I'm curious, I'd like to hear you talk about what some of your core beliefs are. How is it that how has your belief system changed over the years so that you can say, you know what, I'm going to trust my intuition here?
So you mentioned something there, Pamela, that I resonated with very strongly, and it's a core belief for me, and it's come through a lot of different experience, and that is, you said that life happens for you. And if you look at a life, a human life, whether you've lived for 30 years or if you go through to 80 years, a human life is made up of millions of events. And some of those events are very ordinary. We wake up, we have a cup of tea, we have a shower, we get dressed, et cetera, et cetera. And some of those events are a little more exciting. We fall in love, we have a relationship, we make a new friend, et cetera, et cetera. And then other events might be more traumatic, like someone who's very dear to us dies or is hurt, people get sick, et cetera, et cetera. But essentially, life is made up of a series of events. And it seems to me there's only two options as to how we experience these events. I've been talking about this for a long time, and nobody's come up with a third option. But if there is one, I'd love to hear about it. And the dominant option, or the dominant zeitgeist in North America, in Western Europe, and in most countries, is we live our life as if life is something that happens to us. So we have expressions like she was dealt a difficult set of cards, he was, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, if we're driving along in our car and someone smashes into the back of us, we think, hell, why did that have to happen to me? And the problem with that is that it's like we're a cork bobbing on an ocean. It's like we're just out of control. Life happens to us. We don't know whether something good or bad is going to happen. And I don't want to live that life. I made a decision 20, 30 years ago that I don't want to live that life. And the only other option, alternative for me, is that life happens for me. And what I mean by that is life happens for my growth, for my evolution, for my development. And the moment that I made that switch, and so what happened is, to begin with, I began looking at life like that. And then an uncomfortable event happens and you switch back to the default setting. And then you start again. And gradually, over the last 30 years, I would say that 85% of my life, when an event happens, even if it's uncomfortable for me, I say, okay, that hurt. I'm uncomfortable. I feel excluded. I feel rejected. But how could this be happening for me? And when you ask that question, to me, one of the most intelligent questions in life is, how could this be supporting me? And there's still, I get caught out like everyone else. 15% of the time something happens and I react. But what's different there is it might take me 3 minutes or 30 minutes to bring myself back, whereas before it could take 3 weeks. So for me, that core belief that you articulated, I passionately, sincerely believe that everything that happens in life, even if it's incredibly painful, even if people are hurt, is somehow supporting my evolution. It's a biggie, that one.
Mm-hmm. It sure is.
Yeah.
And I love, you just so beautifully articulated that. And you know what, the word that kept coming to me as you were talking is, you know, you've made the shift to living an empowered life rather
Exactly.
than a disempowered life, you know, where you're just kind of drifting along and kind of at the whims of whatever randomness life happens to throw your way. No, I believe that everything is divinely orchestrated. And when we really do, you know, really cultivate our core belief system that, you know, again, life is happening for us, life is rigged in our favor. And those are beliefs, by the way, that anyone can choose to adopt. You know, there isn't a limited amount of those beliefs to go around. This is not a zero-sum game. I mean, everyone can adopt that belief if they so choose to for their life, and their life will radically transform, but you have to do the work from the inside out. I think so many people are so focused on, and it's conditioning, right? We're focused on the action, the to-do list, the accountability, like, what do I need? They jump into the action right away, but they have to start earlier on. You have to do the work in the vibrational form, in the belief stage. And then those beliefs become the actions, you know, becomes the thoughts, becomes the actions, etc. So
can I mention that there's another big core belief that I think sits alongside this? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, you know, I'm 65 now, and so some of this stuff goes way back to when I began. It was just a beginning to make some of these shifts. And I remember a time when, you know, I was thinking in all the great religious traditions, the devil or Lucifer or evil was personified as the lie, the lie. And that sits quite comfortably with me, because I've noticed when I tell myself a lie or I get caught up in a lie, it's like we weave this magic web and we reinforce it, and it takes me further away from the truth, but further away from myself. And I sat down and I said to myself, I did some meditation reflection, and I thought, what is the biggest lie of human existence? What is the biggest lie of human existence? And the answer that I came up with is I've never changed in the 30 years or so since. And I've sat with a lot of groups and invited people to come up with different answers. And for me, the biggest lie of human existence is the idea that something or someone outside of me can make me happy. The idea that someone else or something can make me happy. Now, this to me is a pernicious lie. It's all around us all the time, and I can get caught up in it. So, you know, the next relationship, we get married, we get divorced, we go into a relationship, we come out, you know, the next house, the next motor car, the next job. And I catch myself, not so much now, but even after I'd made this discovery, I would catch myself every day thinking my wife should make me happy. And I've realized today that my wife cannot make me happy. It's impossible. If I choose to be unhappy, or if I, you know, it's like I cannot make her happy. So you talked about empowerment and responsibility. And for me, I sometimes call it radical responsibility, but actually it's very, very simple responsibility. You know, we have a whole language where we say, she made me angry, she made me sad, he hurt me. No one can hurt me without my permission. No one can make me angry without my permission. So it starts with this level of responsibility and realizing that no one else on the planet is responsible for my well-being. And that once I begin to take that responsibility, actually for my physical well-being, my psychological well-being, my emotional well-being, and my spiritual well-being, and that nothing else, no one else can give me that contentment, that real inner peace that I've discovered. And so this is something that comes and goes for most people. If you sit with a group of people and you have this conversation, I found 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 people, they all nod and agree, but go back to living their life as a victim of life. Yeah. And we give away our power to other people, to spouses, to friends, to a whole range of different individuals. So this is a real big core belief.
It really is. It's a super powerful one, and it's definitely a game changer. And again, as you were talking, the word that was coming up this time was, and it's along the same lines, but is unconditional. I believe that most people are conditioned. They believe they're living the conditional life, right? The life that is based on, oh, I'll be happy if, or I'll be happy when, or it's based on everyone and everything else outside of them. But when you choose, when you intentionally make the choice for yourself that you want to live the unconditional life, which is synonymous with authenticity, synonymous with, you know, connecting to your higher self, connecting to your inner being, etc., really harnessing and drawing that power from within, there really isn't anything that can rattle you. I mean, there really isn't, maybe for a couple seconds or a couple minutes, but you know how to get back there because you're so in tune with what it feels like to be connected to source energy. And, you know, and that's where all of our power comes from. It's really in the now. I think so many people are so focused on the payoff down the road. And yes, you know, we do have to have certain goals and take the spiritually aligned action steps to get there. But I believe that when we really focus on the now, when we harness our power in the now and really connect to who we are, connect to how we feel and what we need to do to optimize our well-being in this moment, that's where life really starts to unfold organically and with ease. And we really do tap into that power, but it really is, and it allows us to operate from that place of inspiration, right? Rather than obligation. I'll just go through the steps, I'll go through the motions to get there. That's the unconscious kind of conditional life. We want to get to a place where we're making decisions for ourselves in every moment. And the decisions are centered around what is the payoff now? Right? Not in terms of the, the cultural, like instant gratification mindset, but payoff in terms of our well-being, how we feel.
Yeah, and as you're talking, Pamela, the resonance for me is just the word that keeps coming up is just truth. I think that is the truth. And I've discovered that truth for myself. And I wouldn't want to mislead you or mislead any of your listeners. So I've discovered that place within myself that I cannot be harmed, I cannot be hurt. It's an expansive place. And that a lot of the things that would normally disturb me, it's impossible for them to disturb me in that place. But I wouldn't want to pretend that I stay in that place all day long. So one of the things that my life consists of is through a day or through an hour, is trying to drop down into that space and to sit in that space more of the time. And then, of course, like everyone else, little things or big things throw me off that space. It's then the question is, how quickly do I get back there? And there's various analogies I use. One of my favorite analogies is if you go to a classical concert or you watch the television and there's this bank of violinists and they hold, before the concert, they're twiddling endlessly with all these little knobs. And then they stop. They tune to the instrument and they accept that it is in tune. Now, the thing about that is the only way you can tell that it's out of tune, or the only way you can tune it, is by listening to it being out of tune. And I think human beings are the same. So it's like I said right at the front, how do I live more authentically? By being more honest about where I'm inauthentic. It's the same with being out of the moment. It is, I catch myself, it's like twiddling the little things, listening for where I'm out of the moment. I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about the past. I'm worrying about something. All worry is unnecessary. And so I stop and I bring myself back into the moment. And for me, as millions of other people, there's a long list of ways that you can do that. But probably one of the simplest and most powerful is the breath. Sometimes I just stop and take 3 deep breaths into my body, bring the awareness to the body, and everything changes. The world I live in changes because I'm back in my center.
Yeah, so important that, breath work is something that we can all go to. It's something that we always have available to us. And one of the things I wanted to mention too is I wanted to echo that, you said this is something that, you could easily lapse back into the lower vibes, lower states of being. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that's part of our humanity, right? That's again, that contrast.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I don't love how I feel, so I'm going to make a different decision and really try to hold that higher feeling longer. So it isn't like a degree where you have it forevermore. It is something, the spiritual alignment, living in truth, living in authenticity, connected to your inner being, whatever phrase you want to use. That is something that needs to be worked at and earned every single moment, because I believe that the lower energies do have a gravitational pull to them. And, we're all creatures of habit. We can all be pulled toward, old paradigms, old patterns that don't serve us. What's comfortable, what's familiar. Oh, I think I'll just lay on the couch for a couple hours instead of going to work out. But, we have to, it's a practice, it's a
discipline.
It's a discipline. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really a training of the mind, to think differently and to challenge yourself and to adopt a different dialogue. So what I'd like to do next is, I know we've got a few minutes left, but what I'd like to do is really focus on, I do a lot of work in the business world as well. I love, one of the reasons I was drawn to you and your work is that, you've really got both sides of the brain. You've got the IQ, the EQ, and you've blended your knowledge, your experience in the business world with spirituality, and you've incorporated both. And I think that is so important. And that is so very much aligned with the work that I do. My background is, I'm actually a numbers geek by background. I did lots of asset liability modeling and mergers and acquisitions work back in the day as a pension benefits consulting actuary. So I very much lived in that space of, left brain, very linear thinking for a very long time. So long story short, different events in my life like catapulted me to where I am today. And now I do energy work in the business world. So I incorporate more of the right brain type concepts, like you talked about, intuition, patience, surrendering, trusting the process, learning to just flow, relaxing into it. All of that, blending those energies with the left brain, more like alpha, roll up your sleeves and just crank through it and make stuff happen kind of energy. I'm saying with no judgment, I'm totally an alpha as well.
Sure.
So I totally get that. But what I found is like true magic can happen. You can move faster and more purposefully and more intentionally when you do incorporate those other energies. It's really kind of a process of alchemy, right? Just sort of blending the energies. So would love to hear you talk about the importance of that, the importance of opening your mind up, your life, your
Yeah.
spirit up to incorporating the other energies.
Well, like you, Pamela, I can tell that you're passionate and enthusiastic about that, and I love it. And really, it was just a natural progression. Is I worked almost exclusively with individuals, and then some of those individuals were CEOs of organizations. I mean, they said, "Would you come and work for our business?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" And I'd had a couple of stints myself, like you, in the business world. So now I love the work I do with business, because if you shift the culture or the zeitgeist of an organization, whether there's 50 or 5,000 people there, you begin to affect everyone in that organization. And as you create change, what I found, it's interesting, some people fall off. It's like apples falling off a tree, and the majority become empowered, and then you attract new people in. So, sometimes, I don't know if you've come across something called constellation work. It's an energy work that you do with big numbers of people, where you set up constellations on energetic basis. And that's very effective with businesses, to look at what's really going on under the surface of the business. But I sometimes go into a business, I tend to work with the senior leadership team, so the CEO, the chairman, because that's where you get the greatest influence. And I sometimes have a day with a business looking at what is the soul of this business. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been told by procurement directors, "Oh, no, you can't mention that word." I said, "Well, please find someone else," But it always leads to the most incredible discussion. Or sometimes I have a day saying, "What is the heartbeat of this business?" And really getting people to tune into what is the real heartbeat. Because if we could listen to the heart of this business and realign ourselves to the heart of the business, we'd create a shift. And then, to give a really tangible example, if you traveled around the world to pretty much any country in the world, and you sat with business women and men for a period of time, one of the words that would arise very quickly is competitors. There's everyone talks about who are your competitors. If you have any kind of outside consultant come in, they'll talk about your competitors. And for me, one of the things that I've taught for some while is that capitalism as a system is rooted in competition. And competition is rooted in the energy of lack. It's the idea there's not enough for everyone. And we've been conditioned all our lives to there's not enough food, there's not enough water, there's not enough love, there's not enough forgiveness, there's not enough whatever. And I say, what if there were no competitors? What if, because I think the shift that we're going through is away from competition. What if there was enough for everyone? Now that's it's a simple idea, but it's a radical shift for business people. So I coach a lot of people to say, what if there was enough? What if, instead of having competitors, all we ever had was collaborators? What if there were other organizations doing what we're doing, and we actually thought they were slightly better at some areas, so we recommended people to go to people we thought were better than us, and it would just come back another way to us in the areas where we're actually at the top of our game. Now, some people can dismiss that as a little bit airy-fairy, but I've worked with a lot of companies. And when you understand the inner dynamic of that and the essence of that. And if you start adopting it, it's like everything else in life. What we're talking about here is empirical. You can measure it. If you're willing to try that, I've never had a business not try that without having positive results. So these are the kinds of things that I'm doing in business, which is just shifting the way the whole business operates.
I love that. And that is such much needed work, particularly now when we're in the midst of this shift in collective consciousness to really, old paradigms that aren't serving us well
Yeah.
in business and personal relationships and the way that we live, et cetera, are falling away. They're crumbling. And it's giving rise to, it's making way for newer paradigms that are congruent with the direction in which humanity should be going. And I love that, just bringing awareness to that, this whole idea
Yeah.
of talked about competition. That's fear-based, right? Like you said, that's
It's
rooted
really
in fear.
fear-based.
Fear that there's not enough, right? Fear that you've got
Exactly.
to be the one to grab first or whatever. And
Yeah.
no, if we shift over, I shouldn't say simply because it's a work, it's a process. But if we make the decision to work toward abundance, right? To living in that mindset, all of a sudden, all of these things that no longer serve us and have, really weighed us down for so long start to fall away and we magically start to become lighter. Case in point, right after, and this is something that I believe in. This is something that I practice in my work. In fact, one of the interviews that I have right after this is with a life coach who I actually used to coach. She actually started her own life coaching business. And so I'm having her on my show to talk about her life coaching business.
Fantastic.
And again, that's rooted in, I don't believe in competition. I don't believe that, that's not what this is about. This is about me helping her, lifting her up and her sharing her message with the world. And I always say there's how many people, 7.6, 7.7 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
We'll all find our matches if we just turn it over to the universe to
I know.
allow vibration to work. There are plenty of people to go around. We'll find our matches.
Yeah, and I often talk about the new mathematics, and we went to school and we were taught 1 + 1 = 2. But what I've discovered is that 1 + 1 = 5 or 7. If you and I sit down and we collaborate on something, the result is much bigger than the individual components of you and I, because you engage a different kind of, as you say, you engage the universe. You have a different level of support, and we kind of know this, and even in businesses, I've demonstrated this time and time again, where you get 3 or 4 people that really sign up to having a purpose or a vision, and they're not working for themselves. The outcome is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's absolutely synergistic, right? Like you said,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
5 or 7 or infinity. I mean, really,
Infinity. That's right. There is no limit.
right. There
There
is no
is no
limit.
limit.
Exactly.
And one of the ways we were talking earlier about this, learning to drop down into the now, becoming distracted, drop backing in, and now we're talking about the same thing in business. I often look at this in terms of biological evolution. So at one time, I'm not a very good anthropologist, but at one time we all lived in the sea, and we came out of the sea and we learned to breathe on dry land. And at one time we were all quadrupeds. We had 4 legs, and we learned to stand upright. And the way that happened is somebody stood upright, they went back down. They stood upright, they went back down, and then other people stood up. And it probably took, I don't know, 400,000 years for us to be bipeds. Now, I think the human species is going through a similar evolutionary transition now. And we're evolving away from living in the past or the future to learning to live in the present. We're evolving away from seeing everything as competition to collaboration. And I have no idea whether this is going to take 50 years or 500 years, but it's happening. It's happening. And we can't stop it. So, I try to ride the wave of that evolutionary thrust, and to align with this transformation, with this change. And I'm not perfect, I'm very imperfect, but to me, it's really exciting. When I think about it in these terms, it's like, it's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be gathering with other people and sharing our experience, and supporting others to see it from this perspective, because it's incredibly exciting.
It sure is. Yeah. Exhilarating through and through for sure. So yeah, we're just about wrapped up. I could sit here and chat with you all day. It's an exciting discussion. But before we wrap up, I would like to give you the opportunity to share anything else that you'd like to, including your contact information, if people would like to get in contact with you directly.
Well, the simplest way is probably through my website. There's quite a lot of content on the website, which is just andrewwallas.org, O-R-G. Um, but I think probably what comes up for me right now is that part of this transition is that I used to do a lot of things on my own. I used to think I had to do it myself. And I think what I do now is I tend to gather with other people a lot. And I think we need to come together. I think we need to get back to community, small groups. And I think, I find myself drawn to some people where I resonate in the same way. And we need to support each other and not be on our own. I think the Hopi elders said some time ago that the days of the lone wolf are over. And we are, we're actually community species. We're here to be together. And so I try to encourage myself and others to spend time coming together with like-minded people and sharing authentically, like you're doing here. I think what you're doing here is amazing. It's creating a platform for people to gather and just do that.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for saying that and for your time this morning and for all of this amazing work you're doing in the world. So I just
Oh, bless you. It's been great fun. Thank you very much.
thank you. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. I appreciate you. And I'm grateful that you've carved time out of your day to be here with us and listen to everything that Andrew has had to share. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you soon. Bye.